We break down what was a pretty successful signing day for LSU. I know that it was polluted with some of the news over the last couple of days that LSU had lost out on Cade Phillips and lost out on Bryce Underwood. But as Brian Kelly explained yesterday, those guys couldn't say no. It got to a position where, competitively from the financial standpoint, it didn't make a lot of sense for them to go anywhere else. And you heard Kelly kind of break down the changes that are happening in recruiting, some of the tactics that will be, really tinkered and tweaked moving forward as far as recruiting is concerned. And, he had a comment that he made, and he kind of pointed out that he was kidding, but I'm not necessarily sure that it's not the best way, or at least one way, to have put into plan, executing a plan where he talked about you have someone raising money all year long, building a pile of cash and going out and buying a class. And there are some schools that have the luxury of a built-in bank, right, where they just have their own bank. They literally have money trees that they can hit up, pick off of, and go throw an extra $650,000 at a defensive back the day before signing day after that player had shut his process down, talking about Cade Phillips. And even Brian Kelly, the coach that got burned on it, said yesterday, you can't blame the kid. And I would really and truly, I would have a team of people that was their sole responsibility was to throw on an LSU football polo, travel around the country to passionate and diehard LSU fans, boosters, supporters, and go raise money for the football-only collective all year long. And when you get to these stop dates where, signing day, and you've got some guys on the hook, or you do what other schools are doing. Oregon signed 5 stars yesterday. 2 of them never have been to Eugene. They've never even taken a visit to the campus. That's strong. They're flipping people from like Ohio State. Now, I believe that if it was your job and you had 2 other team members with you, where you had a budget built in where you can travel to go see anybody at any time who loves and cares about LSU, that has the bank account worth traveling to, sitting down, having a sales conversation with, and going and building this war chest. That, to me, makes a ton of sense if the formula says the highest bidder wins on a lot of these kids, or at least some of them, right? And, I think that is a pretty sensible plan when you think about what this recruiting is. I thought Kelly was very insightful yesterday. I thought he gave really kind of the look, the feel of what it's like to be recruiting now. It's even changed over the last 2 years, as he remarked.
Feels like it's changed over the last 2 weeks.
Right. For sure. But, he was giving comps to things that mattered 2 years ago that not necessarily matter at all anymore, right? For as dominant and as good of a relationship builder that a guy like Frank Wilson is, it has a ton of value, in my opinion, still, but it's not necessarily, you have to know how to use it. Do you spend all your time and resources and energy from a guy like Frank Wilson on a player outside of the state that at the last minute is a high priority for that state school, and you could get burned at the finish line? to just having him in the boardroom breaking down the financial structure of how you're going to pay somebody. And, whether you like me or not, this is the best offer. So let's hear from Kelly. I thought it was a really good press conference. I thought it was an insightful press conference. He started the presser off giving a lot of love to his staff, giving a lot of love to the support staff, to the university, talking about like it's a all hands on deck effort from the LSU contingent.
We already had his paperwork, but we wanted to make sure we let you. Well, good afternoon. Today feels more like, tax day than it does signing day. Scrambling the last few days. It's unlike any recruiting period that I've ever been involved in. Recruiting is about identifying, evaluating. It's about logistics, and it's about a desire to build relationships with student athletes. And you do that over a long period of time. And so when you're announcing a class, this is the culmination of, in some instances, 18 months to 2 years' work. I'm really proud of my staff, my football staff, support staff, and the university. Everybody is all in when it comes to recruiting here at LSU, from our president to our athletic director, all the way down to the student assistant that is driving the golf cart around on, every visit. The photo shoot that goes late at night. I mean, I could go on and on. It takes a village, truly, and that's incredible here that we have that kind of commitment to this large endeavor.
Kelly goes into how the landscape has changed and what the priorities now of recruiting are.
But I would be remiss if I didn't say that, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, this is a new landscape that we are in recruiting. And new, when I say it's not just about finding the right fit academically. It's not just about finding the right fit where you can develop holistically and graduate and play for a championship. It's about what the most money I can get. And that's unfortunate. But it's the world we live in. And you have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to realign and be prepared.
Kelly yesterday talking about some of the things that are changing right now within recruiting, and his discussion on this recruiting class opened up.
We have a class that is going to be represented in, somewhere near 24, 25. There is still more that we think that is going to be added to this class in terms of freshmen. But many of those were committed prior to their senior year and stayed committed to us. 9 out of 10 of them. We did lose a few of them, and it wasn't because we didn't recruit those players and offered them the opportunity to develop here holistically in all the areas that I just mentioned. But we are in a new world, and so we had to pivot, realign, and find how we could best continue to build this class.
Yeah, man, things are changing, right? I mean, I think things are changing like under your feet as you're walking, as you're kind of trying to navigate where you are. Things are just kind of ultimately moving and shifting, and you're trying to keep up. And, given the circumstances, given what the news had been trending for LSU over the last couple of days, I thought the class, in the way that they finished landing DJ Pickett, Obviously, that was something that they were very secure on before yesterday. I think they got the confirmation from Pickett, really, but when he left town, that this wasn't going to be a lot of drama coming down to the finish line here. And then they got the flip from Solomon Thomas. I mean, I saw the Solomon Thomas quote where he said he was just real disappointed that he didn't end up at Florida State. And, you know, I don't know the entire backstory of how Thomas ended up at LSU. Either way, you get another 5-star offensive lineman to Baton Rouge and put into that room with Brad Davis and, you know, see how that, you know, can shake out. I mean, that is a room that is just so abundantly talented. I mean, just incredibly ton of talent in that room. So it's you know, it's cool to see another one in Thomas, who really, when Kelly met with the media yesterday, hadn't had the confirmation yet. He couldn't give a. I thought it was really good of him, you know, kind of breaking down, giving a thought on all the players in the class, of, you know, kind of giving you the stance of why LSU liked the player and what they liked about him, how he thought they could come in and make an impact. And you know, I thought that, you know, it was like I said, insightful to what they're thinking, what they're going through, how they're trying to make the changes, how they're trying to really just keep up in a day and an age that it's wild. You know, I mean, to think about what you're coming from and what it now exists as, it's just it's a polarizingly different game, and you have to make a lot of changes on that. So
I'm going to play this Solomon Thomas clip real quick because I just have see what he had to say.
I had a conversation with the offensive line coach. He's a great guy on and off the field, and that was the kind of same vibe that I was getting from the offensive line coach from Florida State before. I think I made the final decision truly when I was really at peace with it. How are you? Was maybe yesterday, when I was truly like, okay, this is more than just a commitment. Like, this is going to be my life. I was waiting on a phone call today on, you know, some determining factors that, you know, could probably lead me, you know, to different schools. But I'm glad it's over, honestly. I was ready to get it over with. Again, just, you know, really disappointed I couldn't go to Florida State.
So I played that again because isn't that, in the world of the transfer portal, is that not something that you would look at and go, you kind of have to keep recruiting him while he's on campus?
Absolutely.
Because he's like clearly wanted to go to Florida State, and if they make an offensive line hire, he's not going to not contact Solomon Thomas.
No, I mean, I think, well, the first time I saw that, I was like, wow. Oh. I mean, that's a wow. I mean, but, you know, I mean, either way, you get the letter of intent, you got him on campus. I think, you know, once players get to campus, you start building friendships, relationships, you start going through your own process. You know, I mean, obviously that could go one of two ways. It could start going, you know, bad, but I mean, a lot of those experiences are usually positive, especially for a kid who's as talented as Thomas is. And, you know, hopefully LSU can do a good enough job of just, you know, showing what the place is. And him just realizing that I'm supposed to be here. You know, I mean, sure. I mean, I'm sure that these stories exist a lot where, you know, kids want to go one place, but they end up having to go to another. But it all works out in a good spot. So
yeah, because you've seen it from LSU's perspective. Whenever they wanted to go to LSU, but they ended up picking another school, like you could see kind of the reaction to them picking up a different hat or whatever, and you don't ever really see those kids come back, even though that I did want to go to LSU. And so hopefully that is the case where, right, I picked this school and then, all right, LSU has done a good enough job of re-recruiting me essentially, and the experience is good enough to where I don't want to go to Florida State, but I've never really heard it say out loud.
Yeah, right. Like on signing day.
Yeah, like what happened?
With the LSU hat on.
Yeah.
I mean, it was I mean, the first time I saw it, it was like, wow, that was okay. I mean, yeah, they better keep recruiting him. Brian Kelly was talking about the commitment still to the state of Louisiana first, and that's ultimately where it starts.
So as I've always said, it begins with recruiting the state of Louisiana. And in this class, it will again be represented largely from the state of Louisiana. We will have the number one player in the state of Louisiana at the running back position, and we're excited about him. Certainly Harlan Berry is a great player. We'll have 10 players from the state of Louisiana in this class. And again, that's pulling your base. That's really doing the job. And we feel like we did a great job of getting fit and talent at this flagship university here at LSU. Certainly across the board, we want to stay in this footprint, so you're going to see players from Texas and Georgia and Florida, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and we went up to Indiana and got a player from the Midwest as well. So I think overall this is the finest class that I have signed. I think it points to the work that the entire staff has done over the past 18 months in putting together an outstanding class. And regardless of what happened over the last week, all these guys wanted to be here at LSU and representing LSU and wanting to be part of this and wanting to be part of a championship is much more important to me than who didn't want to be here at LSU. And that's what I'm going to talk about today.
So Kelly giving a breakdown of the class. He's also talking about the approach here in this soundbite and how much it shifted.
Yeah, so that's the bar, right? I mean, it's Oregon, Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Georgia, Alabama. I could keep naming Notre Dame. I mean, I'll give you all the names. You guys know what they are. But now it's no longer about just your brand. Your brand has to be backed up with the ability to supplement that with dollars, because that's what we're in. And so if you want to get into the portal, if you want to be able to close some of these, you have to have active participation from a donor base. And it can't just be one or two guys. It has to be from all those that want to see the Notre Dames or the Ohio States or the Oregons or the Alabamas do well. They have to be involved. And so that means the LSUs, if they want to be at the top of the food chain, then we have to be involved as well. And that's just the reality of where we are today. And whether we like it or not, it's where it is today.
So Kelly talking about the approach there. Don't know if he was talking about the approach for the Irish or for LSU.
Man, that's
a good
quick thinking on his feet there.
That was a good podium catch there.
LSU, Notre Dames of the world.
Look, Notre Dame's of the world. Yeah, it was a good catch.
Notre Dames of the world.
So it's obvious. Look, it's changing a lot, man. It's changing a lot. One thing that we did not talk about as far as news surrounding LSU is one of the coaches moving on. LSU tight ends coach Slade Nagel is expected to accept the offensive coordinator role at Houston. Of course, Houston head coach Willie Fritz had Slade Nagel on his staff at Tulane, and where he served as the offensive coordinator under Fritz at Tulane in 2022 and 2023. Tulane was 23-4 during that stretch. So Nagel is, after one season, leaving LSU and heading back over to Houston, or heading to Houston with Willie Fritz. So it will be interesting to see how Kelly uses this tight ends role. Obviously, Nagel had a little bit of input on the special teams, but it will be interesting to see how he fills this and what he does and how he aligns it with the play calling and the play caller, or does he use this role to maybe shake some things up. We'll see. As you know, that was, I don't know if it was expected on Nagel, obviously, but I think with Fritz and him being at Houston and the success he was having, there was always a thought that, it was right there and it could at any point pop back in. So maybe he does have a short list in mind. Maybe he's got a detail, or maybe he's got some thoughts in mind on how he can navigate this. But it is going to be interesting, in my opinion, to see how he replaces this role.
Because that was somebody that also kind of had Louisiana ties, that you would kind of put this entire staff together for recruiting purposes. Whenever it came down to it, it was, yeah, they can all coach it, but the real, I guess, silver lining of having all of these guys from Louisiana that all kind of coached in Louisiana or from Louisiana was to recruit Louisiana. But you can't fault Slade Nagel for taking he got a promotion.
Yeah.
He gets to go be a play caller. And the one way I guess you could spin it, if you wanted to, is maybe it quiets down the offensive play calling room. There might have been too many cooks in the kitchen when you have so many guys with play calling experience that you kind of don't really settle on a philosophy. So we'll see what Brian Kelly does, because that hire made sense at the time, and it's certainly, it feels like a loss because what he was doing with Pimpton and Green when they were in the tight end room, and obviously Mason Taylor. So he had things that felt like the tight end play wasn't bad, and then you're bringing in more tight ends this year. So probably a loss, but because of Brian Kelly's history, it's not like he's going to he has a big tree to shake from his coaching experience. I'm sure he can add somebody that he feels like will help the team at some point, but I wonder if he goes the same route as a Louisiana guy.
I am interested to see how he handles it as well. I would think so, because of listening to the way that, he described the recruiting methods now and keeping Louisiana first, and what it means to have Louisiana guys on staff to be able to relate, right? I think that's a big thing, and be able to, have the conversations and, know that people have the loyalty and have the back of the people that they're being recruited by. I think that means a lot. It means a lot when you come in and you're wearing a purple and gold polo and you're trying to crank up a conversation with, a lot of these coaches and players that, they're looking for that. They're intrigued by that. They're drawn to that. So,
and that's a little bit of what he talked about. We talked about the brand. I mean, we got caught up on the Freudian slip that he made, but he was pretty much saying that doesn't mean as much as maybe we thought in the past, because everybody's got a brand. Mm-hmm. Now it became more about dollars and cents, and this is the clip that I think you wanted to play earlier with how he changes his approach, and he talks about value a lot and how they kind of like slot the players, and what it seems like in my mind, because you see people then, their terms, overpay or overuse resources for players that LSU was in on, and it kind of explains what they're pivoting toward. So I'll go ahead and play that.
Well, I mean, I think you could make the case that, you just go out through the entire year and you raise money, right? That's one. And look, I'm not trying to be a wise guy, but one side of it could say, hey, let's just go raise money the entire recruiting season and get X, and then the last few weeks, let's just go buy a team of freshmen. Obviously, that's not what we're going to do, right? But what it means is that recruiting no longer is just about recruiting. It's no longer just about relationships. You need a collective, you need the NIL to supplement your recruiting efforts. And that's just the reality of what we live in. Because you can't close every one of these just because you've got great relationships and they want to go to LSU. Because I'll give you an example. Where we see Tyler Miller, relative to revenue sharing, another school might see him much higher because they value him 20%, 30%, 40% more because they need him more. And so their number comes in at X. It doesn't mean we devalued him, but we've got 3 other tackles in our program. And so that's where the rub comes, right? That's where this comes of, well, so-and-so's offering us X, and you're only offering us Y. Well, it has nothing to do with your value. It's just the other program is doesn't have a tackle, and they desperately need you as their cornerstone, and so they're going to spend more money. So it's not your market value. It's what they need, and that's where this becomes really, really difficult. Anybody that we've lost in the last few days, it wasn't because we didn't offer money. It wasn't because we didn't recruit them. It was because the value that was meant to them was exponentially more. It wasn't market value. It was exponentially more because it meant they needed that piece, and they were going to do whatever was necessary to get that piece.
It's a great soundbite. I think that's a great sound from the start to the finish of it. I mean, at the top of it, when he's saying, is it a bad idea to put a group on the road all year long trying to raise money and buying the best team? No, I don't think that's a bad idea at all, or at least having that a part of the strategy where, if you even want to be in the fight with Cade Phillips, if you want to be in the ring with Jakeem Stewart. And by the way, the Stewart thing, I think it got outside of LSU's bidding comfort level, right? Like what he's talking about, how they evaluate the player. They put a price and evaluation on him, and they got to a point where the demands got outside of what they were willing to pay. I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind when we're talking about paying guys coming out of high school who are widely unproven is how that is going to translate in the locker room, right? I mean, Bryce Underwood is walking into a locker room of his peers. All those guys are 18 to 22 years old, where he's going to be making X amount, so much amount more than the rest of them. How does that fit in within the locker room? I think once he starts making plays and they start winning games, people will start to accept that. If it goes the other way and it doesn't work out, he's throwing interceptions, he's not living up to the hype and necessarily the money, how that plays in the locker room, you have to take that into account. Jakeem Stewart is built like a first-round NFL defensive tackle. 6'5", 265 pounds. On film, looks like a dancing bear, right? I mean, that's what a big NFL defensive tackle looks like in high school. I mean, that guy checks all the boxes. But he also, at this point, to where he is right now, for as good as he looks physically, he's only done it 11 times in high school. There has to be an evaluation as well as a balance of understanding that he's coming into a locker room of proven players, of guys that are fighting for spots, guys that are fighting for reps. And it makes sense to pay Jakeem Stewart, a 5-star defensive tackle, one of the top defensive players in this recruiting cycle, a lot of money for him to go to college. At some point, it crosses a threshold where it doesn't make any sense anymore to keep negotiating when the money's not going to make sense for the school and the locker room is not going to make sense for a place in him to fit in with a contract that he's demanding. If you look at Jakeem Stewart's quotes around his pledge to USC, and I'm wishing Jakeem Stewart the best, really. I mean, I hope he goes to USC and succeeds. I always pull for Louisiana kids, but all the quotes that I've seen, he's making comments about business people in Los Angeles. This guy, Gavin Morris, keeps popping up in all of his his quotes. I know nothing about USC. I know nothing about whoever Gavin Morris is. It seems like by reading the quotes of Stewart that this guy is a businessman who's going to get him into a lot of opportunity in LA. And if that's something that USC is recruiting on, good on them. It is a built-in luxury and advantage that they have having, that town and that money behind their back. And if they're using it to get 5-star defensive tackles out of Louisiana, good on them. But it's obvious that's what this came down to, and LSU just tapped out. Really. I mean, I'm told that they had an offer on the table that was close to $1.3 million for Stewart. That's, man, that is, it's huge money, right? I mean, I'm sure they paid Glenn Dorsey coming out of high school. It was nowhere near $1.2 million a year, and I could have argued that would have been underpaying him, knowing what we know now. But, I mean, for, you to be and look at $1.2 million and say that it's not enough, well, I mean, that's the threshold. That's the barrier. That's where they cut off negotiation, and that's where they believe if they pay any more, it's going to be a tough sell in the current locker room that they have of a team that they're trying to put together and win, of why is this cat getting all the money when he's only played 11 games? So
I would argue that every freshman that walks into a locker room now is probably going to be one of the highest paid players on the team, the way that the market has changed. Like, these guys, when they were getting recruited, it wasn't how NIL was. It was literally like, I've seen the argument for Will Campbell only made, $500,000, and he was the highest paid player on LSU's roster. Every player that you signed, at least of the 5-star variety or high 4-star, Harlan Barrier's making more than that. DJ Pickett's making more than that. And so that's where all these kids are going to walk in the highest paid player on their team now because of the way that recruiting with this cycle of it's pay to play. It's no longer we got business deals lined up for you, and LSU is still trying to do it that way where there's going to be some return on the investment into the player with the brand, with whatever, how they want to market it. But other schools aren't doing that. They're paying for play. And so that's where it feels like, I don't know if that really matters, but it should. But I don't think I don't think some schools are taking that into account, and we'll see how it works out. But in that same breath, whenever he talks about evaluating value, and I still am of the belief that, sure, you have an idea of what you think his value is. Other people value him more, right. So that becomes his value.
And that's what he was just talking about.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Jakeem Stewart was probably very valuable to LSU, and I just wonder, whenever it gets to 1, 2, or 2, like when is that the conversation because of this is all the money that we have, or we really just don't think he's worth $2 million?
I think it's probably a little bit of both.
Because I would say everything. Jakeem Stewart for me is an outlier because it feels like it would be a kind of a sideshow at this point with everything that, and I wish him well also. But it's felt like he was never really in on LSU, but because of everything that went through his commitment to get him reclassified, move him around New Orleans, get him into high school so he can graduate early, all of which we gave credit to LSU and Frank Wilson. And I'd imagine that is still the case. So for him to kind of rebuff that and go to USC, I think is maybe he became more of that. That probably factors in as well. But all that said, LSU was in the need for defensive line help, and was going to be the number one player in the state if he wasn't already, and then probably the number one player in the country if he hadn't reclassified. So that I would establish as a need, and it's probably very valued.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean...
So even the things that you do value, you can't afford.
Well, I think they can afford it, but at some point they have a threshold where they say, this is not good sense. I cannot imagine that these conversations are just being thrown against the wall to see what sticks. I think behind closed doors, they have been talking about the 2025 recruiting class for 2 years minimum, right? And knowing now this is a recruiting class that has been NIL has been intact for the last 3 seasons. By the time you get here, you got a clear understanding of how it's working, and they have had a plan in place and probably values put on players for a while now. I'm sure Harlem Berry, I'm sure Jakeem Stewart, I'm sure Bryce Underwood, I'm sure all these guys at the top of the class have all had their deals, their money, their value lined up, explained, laid out to what it looks like, how it works. And this is also kind of the ceiling for that. Like we can't go past this point. Like from our financial standpoint, it's also our evaluation that tells us this is what you're worth to us, right? I mean, if businesses just get caught up in the emotion of saying, well, he's saying he wants $2 million, or well, we have to have him pay him, you're not going to last very long, right? Like you have to have your principle and standard of what you say. Look, Jakeem Stewart means a ton to what we're doing and the future of what we're going to look like. But we're only willing to do so much. I mean, you move mountains for the kid to transfer schools, get eligible, transfer, and graduate early. That ain't easy. It's not easy in the city of New Orleans to do. LSU and Frank Wilson got that done in a week. And then to offer what LSU has had on the table, which, like I said, I've got from a great source that it was close to $1.3 million, plus perks. Like, we're not even talking about like the stuff outside of what comes with that. Place to live, something to drive, stipend on, food, gear. I mean, like just like stuff that is for a college kid, it's wild. But, but a fair offer, right? Something that you can look at and say, hey, man, like, this is how much we value you. This is a great deal. And then, to say, well, somebody else has $2 million. Well, fight on. I mean, really, good for you. Like, that's great. I see